Masai al-Khair, everybody. Mo Davis, the Tribus Outsider. I want to highlight this comment because it absolutely accentuates even more how vile the role of the United States is in all of this, how intentional all of this is, and how it's just a continuation of how sadistic systemically the United States is. Because they did things that were horrific like this to enslaved peoples, to segregated peoples. And now they can't get off within their own country anymore, so they go to other countries and get off. And this also proves to a certain extent how far in bed the United States is with the Blue Star Nation. In the feminist movement, I'm going to use this example because that is an example of something that is done to women that is absolutely gross. And it is coercive. And everybody agrees that it's coercion. And I'm going to use that to highlight how even more disgusting this situation is. Now, feminism, especially Western feminism, YT feminism, often talks about one of the greatest assaults of coercion on women. One of them, this is one of many, is weaponized incompetence. Weaponized incompetence can be applied to many things. It can also be applied in the racialized sector, but most racialized people already know what I'm talking about. So this message is more so for my friends who are like this. In the women's community, we often talk about weaponized incompetence. And weaponized incompetence is basically men pleading ignorance to coerce women into doing things by pretending simply that they don't know how to do something. And that way they coerce the woman into doing something. Now, let's go into basically the operations of these aid, if we can even call them aid, delivered by air as flying projectiles that could unalive people and have murdered people. But let's talk about the operations of this. Now, we have government people who are deciding that they're going to provide the aid. We have government people who are deciding what is in the package. We have a team that decides what is appropriate to put in these packages, the funding, the da-da-da, budgets, da-da-da-da-da. Then we have the people actually gathering the products off the shelves. And then we have the people packaging the goods before they're in the box with the fighter pilots being dropped on Gazans. Likely fighter pilots that were Aaron Bushnell's colleagues. Just an FYI. But on that note, when we know all these different levels of human beings coming in contact with this package, what are the odds that not a single one of them knew that Muslims don't eat pork? I hear crickets, do you? Let's go even further. Okay? What are the odds that none of these people knew it was Ramadan? Considering the fact that it's all over the news because we're tokenizing how much we need peace for Ramadan while simultaneously doing nothing to help people during Ramadan. And essentially, I'll get to that part in a second. Coercing them. Anyway, I'll get to that in a second. But it's such a YT liberal token, and it's such a Biden ticket for your vote, that he is banking that you're going to believe that he gives a schnazzle about Ramadan. And again, all this is performative. Anyway, y'all can see my video that I just posted before this one where I stitched the initiative OP. But knowing all of this and the likelihood that most people knew it was Ramadan, and the likelihood that there were definitely people along that line that saw the package, saw pork, knowing Muslims don't eat pork. I'm not even going to call it weaponized incompetence because it's significantly more felonious than that. Significantly more felonious than that. The intentional intent to harm. This is psychological warfare. And if you look at the weaponization of food and water during this entire genocide from the very beginning, when they first started displacing people from the north to the south, think of the old man that was thirsty and they offered him water, only to execute him from behind in front of his family. Think of the flour massacre and the many other massacres that were around food delivery that followed. Think of the intentional deprivation of food by the IOF in the north and by Blue Star citizens so proud in the south. And they've overtly said that they want them to starve. And we've seen the sadistic nature of how violent their torture methods are. Psychological, physical, sexual, all of it. We've seen it all. And it's systemic. It's not on an individual basis like we like to pretend it is to whitewash the entire situation. It's very much systemic, calculated, and intentional. And when you think of all of that, and all you allies who scream BLM and are aware of the tactics used to torture and degrade slaves and segregated peoples in the United States and in Canada, not going to forget our lovely Canada, or even the degradation of Indigenous peoples of the North America. This is intentional. This is psychological warfare. They are intentionally trying to break the last thing that the Philistines have, if they still have it. And it's their faith. And that if they still have it, isn't a jab at people. It's in reference to my own personal experience and history. And if you want to know about that, you can comment. Or you can go and check out my page. But people lose their faith when they feel betrayed by everything. And them offering them haluf or khanzir or pork. I've heard so many Philistines say, why has God forsaken us? But what's worse is, why have people forsaken them? If you scream Black Lives Matter and you don't see the similarities, then that's your willful ignorance. Because you refuse to sit in that discomfort.